For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates. This is StratNews Global. I am Amitabh. Revi. On the gist today, we're going to Manila, where our expert analyst is McLain Gill. A warm welcome to all those viewers who are picking up this live stream, and a welcome to those viewers who will watch this later on our YouTube channel. Our analyst, as we said, expert today is in Manila, and we go direct to Manila, where our guest is McLain Gill. He is the Director for South and Southeast Asia at the Philippine-Middle East Studies Association, or PMESA, in Manila. Welcome, Don, again on StratNews Global. Thank you so much for your time so late in the evening in Manila for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amitabh. It's always an honor to be part of your programs, and looking forward to this discussion.
Pleasure's ours, Don. Lots of developments in and around Philippines of late, the last few days, weeks, and even months. We just wanted to get your analysis on, if you could explain to us what the EDCA, or the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, and the expansion from 5 to 9 military bases is all about after the U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin's visit.
Right, thank you. And we have to understand that this is significant, particularly taking place against the backdrop of Philippine President Marcos Jr.'s visit to China in January, and of course the series of engagements that the current president has been having with other like-minded Indo-Pacific powers such as Japan, India, and the United States. And of course, the enhancement or the expansion of the EDCA, this was taken up last year. It was clear that a part of this enhancement would include the increase in number of EDCA sites to bolster the Philippines' defense at a time when China's assertive maneuvers continued to cloud and, of course, to plague the region, particularly because of its rising assertiveness coupled with its accumulation of material power. So, there were discussions, of course, regarding the locations and, of course, a timeline. While that is not explicitly known as of now, there were discussions among the sites that would be critical would be Subic. Now, which, faces the controversial and disputed South China Sea, just quite proximate from the Chinese-occupied Scarborough Shoal. And of course, this gives the Philippines a more expanded ability to really safeguard its territorial integrity, sovereignty, and sovereign rights. So given President Marcos Jr.'s steadfast commitment to securing the Philippines' territorial integrity, along with his desire to work closely with traditional allies, particularly the traditional ally, which is the United States, there is a significant chance of expediting, of course, this evolving expansion roadmap of EDCA. And in fact, this coincides significantly with the position of President Marcos even before the elections, where he said that the need for the U.S. and the Philippines to evolve, the alliance per se, to evolve based on emerging threats and strategic developments is needed, to be able to maximize the utility of the alliance. So given such a reality, it can be assumed that the expansion of EDCA will be expedited. And of course, we would see more robust engagements between Manila and Washington. And hopefully this will pave the way for more capacity building and more defense expansion of capabilities in line with Manila's interest to modernize its military.
We were just seeing those pictures, Don, of President Biden and President Marcos Jr. meeting on the sidelines of the UN in New York in September. You were mentioning the president's visit to China as well this year. How is it really seen in the Philippines, as in President Marcos Jr.'s policy in comparison to his predecessor Duterte, and especially in light of how he dealt with China?
Right, and this is a very important comparison because unlike his predecessor, President Duterte, the time in which President Duterte assumed power came after the term of President Benigno Aquino III. And during his predecessor's time, the Philippines was cozying up relatively well with the United States to the point that all of the strategic eggs were placed in the U.S. basket, particularly against China. And of course, when President Duterte came, he reintroduced an independent foreign policy approach. And this really relied on diversification of strategic partners, and of course, trying to balance relations with other key players in the region and other key neighbors of the Philippines, and lessening the dependence of the utility of the alliance with the United States. However, this was seen to be an anti-U.S. policy by many, but really, if we can see, the Philippines still maintained robust strategic relations with the United States. However, there was a more emphasized approach in really enhancing relations with China, particularly in the economic level. Now we have President Marcos Jr. now, who seeks to bank on the independent foreign policy approach, but really engages based on what I'd like to call proactive autonomy, which is that the Philippines continues to recognize the significance of the alliance, but it seeks to not define its external engagements based on the alliance system. So here we can see that relations with China would also remain a significant factor, and of course, the diversification of strategic partners. However, President Marcos Jr. has emphasized that territorial integrity would be the utmost priority of his government, and that he would not cede even an inch of Philippine territory to China. And this we can see that President Marcos will seek, of course, to leverage on the diplomatic engagements that have been pushing through for the Philippines to really enhance its defense capabilities, enhance its diplomatic networks to deter future threats, particularly from an assertive China, but also seeks to maintain a stable relationship with China, not a provocative one, such as what we had during the time of President Benigno Aquino III.
So just a message for our viewers. If you like this video, the topic, do hit the thumbs up button on YouTube and share this link as widely as possible. When you're talking about President Marcos Jr.'s policies of one, territorial integrity and sovereignty, as you said, vis-a-vis China, but yet strategic autonomy and relations to continue with China, how does all of that sit with recent provocations or provocations that are continuing vis-a-vis Philippines? The latest, I think, was the lasers incident.
Right, right. That was well within the Philippine EEZ. In fact, China has no authority over the Philippines in this particular realm. However, it still continues to provoke Philippine sovereignty and sovereign rights. You're absolutely right. However, we have to understand from a Philippine perspective that President Marcos Jr. seeks to highlight on the importance of the preeminence of geography. We cannot choose our neighbors. And of course, it is necessary for the Philippines to engage proactively, of course, still with China, because China is the Philippines' most powerful immediate neighbor, and that it is relatively impossible to be able to cut off China. However, this does not mean that the Philippines will seek to overlook areas where territorial integrity is compromised, and this is why we can definitely see efforts from the Marcos administration to really solidify defense cooperation with like-minded powers such as the United States, Japan recently. We've also seen in line with its predecessor, a more enhanced engagement with India, Australia as well. So these are the areas that seek to offset an increasingly assertive China. However, this is not a one-night solution, obviously, for the Philippines. And in fact, we can assume that China will continue to maximize its assertive maneuvers, particularly in the West Philippine Sea. However, the Philippines at this point in time, has limited options, and that is that it will have to maintain some sort of stability with China despite the provocations, but at the same time, emphasize particularly on its defense capabilities, its modernization, and defense and diplomatic networks. So this is not going to be an easy and immediate task to really offset an increasingly provocative China, but will really have to be dealt with systemically, particularly in line with the recognition of realpolitik, and that is that we have to live with the current geopolitical situation, but there will always be opportunities to offset these in smaller amounts. But then we are heading towards that direction as we continue to realize that China's provocations continue to be a problem against Philippine sovereignty and sovereign rights.
A couple of questions from a viewer, Jaydeep Kalavi. Don, one is, I guess the US has permanent bases, he says, in South Korea and Japan for the East China Sea. This is expansion he's talking about, the EDCA, I presume, is just for the South China Sea. And he has another one where he asks, what's the status of the Winston Reef standoff? How big a factor could it be in light of this expansion?
Right. And, with regard to the first question, of course, we have to understand the nature of the U.S. alliance system. The U.S. alliance system in the Western Pacific, it's not like how it is in Europe, where it's a collective security arrangement, such as NATO, where an attack on one is attacking against all. With the Western Pacific, of course, it devolves on the hub and spoke system. So we can see definitely that the United States seeks to enhance relations and capabilities of its spokes in order to really provide a maximum deterrence against a rising China. And this is, of course, different from the European counterpart because the key spokes, for example, such as Japan and the Philippines, are not treaty allies. So this creates gaps, particularly in the ability of the alliance system to effectively deal with such threats such as China. And this is not present as it is in Europe. So the expansion of the bases would not only provide the Philippines with more options to really deter the United States, as rather China. And as we can see, the EDCA is a temporary position for the United States. It's not a permanent base, but really the United States presence will be temporary and subject to several conditions as well. And of course, this not only bolsters the Philippines' defense capabilities, but again also improves the U.S. ability to project power vis-a-vis the ongoing and intensifying power competition between the United States and China. Now, particularly in the South China Sea, with regards to the second question, China has the particular strategy that incorporates gray zone maneuvers, which is not entirely enshrined as a particular negative ailment, particularly in international law, but really it is some sort of that middle ground, that gray zone, as we call. And this is where it seeks to maximize its provocation. So the maritime militia, we talk about other forms of gray zone tactics, of course, using non-state apparatus as well. And this is what China has been doing, swarming its maritime militia all throughout the EEZs of other states, particularly the Philippines, in the South China Sea, in the West Philippine Sea. So these are the things that we have to understand, is that China really tries to extend its domestic laws and really tries to apply its domestic laws expansively in the South China Sea. Now, this is where we have all sorts of new modes of engagement of Beijing that really says that, we're following the law. But it's not really international law. It's really more of its law being expanded towards areas that also encompass the EEZs, sovereign rights, and sovereignty of other of the claimant states in the South East Asian region. So this becomes problematic, is because this is not enshrined particularly in UNCLOS. And this also demonstrates, of course, the effectivity of realpolitik, of material power, at the expense, of course, of the preservation of the rules-based order.
Like you said, unlike in Europe, the situation is very different in Southeast Asia. But do you think there's any movement towards stronger security partnerships in terms of, like you were mentioning, Japan and President Bongbong Marcos Jr. again, just coming back from Japan, lots of agreements, most of them, of course, economic. But on his return, he does talk about some kind of a VFA kind of agreement or even a trilateral troop agreement with the US. So some kind of thought is being given to it.
Right. And, we have to understand that the Philippines' visit to Japan particularly comes at a time when Prime Minister Kishida's increasingly security-oriented lens for Japanese foreign policy continues to materialize. And of course, this also coincides with more areas and more opportunities for the Philippines to really benefit from an increasingly security-oriented Japan. So, a key defense deal was signed, which will permit Japanese troops, to take part in training exercises to address issues revolving around natural disasters, humanitarian needs of the Philippines. And this can pave the way for a more robust cooperation and more frequent interaction between the Japanese and Philippine militaries, which will and may also complement the expansion of the EDCA with the U.S. And in line with Japan per se, the strengthening of and the vision to really promote its arms industry can also benefit the Philippines to access a significant technology with lesser restrictions. And of course, Japan has also set a budget of $15.2 million, and it will be set probably around April to bolster the defenses of like-minded Indo-Pacific states such as the Philippines. And in line with the Trilateral, which you have just discussed, there are definitely opportunities with that. However, it is still it is still in its early stages of development. It will require a lot of bureaucratic engagements to really be able to solidify and to operationalize such trilaterals. But then again, it's not impossible because as we can see, we can look into loose trilaterals. In 2019, in fact, in line with Japan, I'd like to add before the statement that, enhancing relations with Japan would also allow the Philippines to enhance relations with other like-minded powers like India. Now, in 2019, the first ever quadrilateral naval exercise in the South China Sea took place between the Philippines, Japan, India, and the United States. And this is the first of its kind. And with what is happening now, the direction where we're headed right now, such multilateral engagements in the defense realm will be more viable, of course.
With all these developments, you're talking about Prime Minister Kishida in Japan and increasing the budget, the Americans in the Philippines engagement in terms of at least those bases, even if they are temporary, to be increased. A lot of activity. You were talking about the first trilateral between India, Japan, and the Philippines, several other, the Quad, Malabar. How is China reacting to all of that, or how is China expected to if it's not doing it immediately?
Right, thank you. And we have to practically say, realistically speaking, and it's safe to say that any addition or subtraction of any strategic variable, particularly in the Western Pacific, in the maritime domain, which is considered a locus of Chinese power, will definitely provoke, of course, the status quo stability of the region. And we could definitely say that China will seek to retaliate by maximizing and by deepening its political and economic clout in the region, similar to what it has done in the 50s or 60s, where it has, provided concessions to key states in the region, immediate neighbors, just so the United States would not be able to penetrate its influence there. So, such things may happen as well. And as we can see, China has been, and as it continues to grow, the confidence that it would have to really try to bounce back and to really try to recalibrate its policies to address such shifts in the region may be larger in scope, larger in frequency, and in depth as well. So, these are the things that we can definitely expect as this continues to go on. In fact, earlier on, since the post-2008, in the post-2008 era, after the financial crisis, China began to have a more confident approach in projecting itself as the next leader, particularly of the Eastern Hemisphere, at the expense of U.S. leadership, as it sort of provided this sort of a narrative that the decline of the U.S. is here and it's time for China to rise. And in fact, this has translated into more assertive and expansive policies at the expense of the territorial integrity and the sovereignty and sovereign rights of states, not even in the Western Pacific only, but in the Indo-Pacific. India has also seen the negative effects of this spillover, particularly in the Indian Ocean region. Now, China has also devised exclusionary policies, particularly in the South and East China Seas, against extra-regional navies, despite the freedom of navigation operations that are enshrined in UNCLOS. So we can definitely say that this would be a problem in the years to come, especially we have the Taiwan factor looming around, the threat of a nuclear armed North Korea. All these factors into play, it is safe to say, unfortunately, that Asia will take up center stage in the international geopolitical narratives.
Just another reminder to our viewers, you see that scroll at the bottom of your screen, you can join our Telegram channel that will give you updates as soon as we put them up, either on our website or interviews like this with Don on our YouTube channel. Since you mentioned India a couple of times in relation to the Philippines, Don, I mean, the big ticket thing, at least here in India, when we look at relations which have been on the uptick but not reached their complete potential, is, of course, the BrahMos. Now that deal signed, we're expecting delivery this year, scheduled this year. But off late, there's been another prong. So it's not just defense; it's development ties that are also increasing.
Right, and the BrahMos, as I've mentioned in my works before, uh, is a step towards the right direction and will not end there. In fact, it will open up more opportunities for robust defense engagements between the Philippines and India. Just briefly touching on the defense layer, I'd like to add, as a reflection of the growing ties, President Marcos Jr. has in fact endorsed India's role to ASEAN to engage with India more to address a series of non-traditional security issues. And in fact, senior Filipino and Indian officers are also in the works of engaging talks towards India's indigenously developed advanced light helicopters. And of course, there are other modes of the expansion of defense relation towards cybersecurity. India has also offered its expertise in cybersecurity to be provided to the Philippines. And looking beyond defense, the Philippines is also looking towards India significantly for a variety of developmental socio-economic areas. As it is recognized, India's contributions are people-centric as a main foundation of its economic engagements and development engagements with other states in the region. And of course, India's promulgation of strategic autonomy, which means that cooperation will not be based on rigid bloc politics, but really based on mutual interests, mutual concerns, and mutual goals, is also a significant factor, especially at a time when the Philippines continues to seek to diversify its strategic partners since the time of President Rodrigo Duterte, which I believe was a significant turning point towards a more positive relation between the Philippines and India. So, as you've rightfully said, the development sector, India is also assisting the Philippines in various initiatives that would also enhance governance, digital governance as well. Our ambassador, Indian ambassador, Ambassador Kumaran, has also been quite active in bolstering India's position and, of course, enhancing the partnership between the Philippines and India beyond defense into other areas such as blue economy, pharmaceuticals, and of course healthcare. As we can see, the pandemic has left a huge scar in the consciousness of the Filipino people, and of course, like-minded powers such as India would also be pivotal, of course, in bolstering the Philippines' capacity to address similar concerns in the future. So we're heading towards a relatively positive direction, but I always say that we need to maximize consistency, particularly in India's operationalization of its Act East policy. We're seeing some great trends, but we need to maximize areas that need to be further explored, particularly between India and the Philippines.
And the movement of late, not just with regards to India, has been away from big multilaterals to minilaterals or trilaterals or small quadrilaterals. In that sense, India and Japan have a robust relationship. The Philippines and Japan have also now re-engaged on their strategic partnership. In defense, I think Indian Sukhois for the first time were flying with their Japanese pilots as well during recent exercises, and that would have been probably very interesting for the Japanese, since if push comes to shove, the Chinese also have Sukhoi, so that engagement will be good. And I think either two or four or both some of the Indian aircraft landed in the Philippines in Clark Air Base as well. But how do you see that trilateral developing, say?
Right. If we're particularly looking into the Philippines, Japan, India trilateral, in fact, there are more areas where where all sides can definitely work to improve not only interoperability between their navies, but also enhance capacity building. And this is an area which the Philippines would relatively seek to tap in order to maximize the military capabilities, in order to demonstrate its commitment towards military modernization. India and Japan are two primarily materially powerful states with growing material capacity, normative heft, and of course the adherence to the maintenance of the rules-based order, and of course democratic principles. And this significantly aligns with the interests of the Philippines. So definitely, as the Philippines continues to recognize the value of strengthening the India-Philippines strategic partnership, and as it continues to seek to bolster its partnership with Japan, we can definitely say that, there would be more areas where these states would be able to engage. So naval maritime cooperation is one thing, and in fact, something that would be relatively significant to Manila, and not only to Manila, but in fact, Japan and India, as they seek to preserve and maintain the stability of the seas. In fact, former Navy Chief of the Philippines highlighted that it is India's significant role, that is quite acknowledged for keeping the seas safe. So there is a huge capacity here. There's a huge opportunity, given, of course, the realizations of more potential for the trilateral, hopefully. But again, we do not need to expect an official, a formal trilateral, but really a loose trilateral based on, of course, common interests and concerns, area-specific trilaterals. Now, that would be very feasible. And in fact, we could be looking into such areas in the near future, as Japan and India have been pivotal in forging trilaterals with other states. In fact, though it has not significantly picked off, the AAGC, for example, a trilateral between India, Japan, and the African continent is significant. And in fact, in the Indian Ocean region as well, India and Japan are working closely together with third countries to be able to provide significant value to the partnership. And similar trends can be seen in Southeast Asia. However, as we recognize, there is more of a looming exclusionary interest from China, of course, to maintain an extra regional gap, particularly in the South China Sea. So that is a challenge that we would have to face. But definitely the areas need to be looked into by, of course, the senior officials of all three countries, because as I continue to say, the opportunities are on key issues.
Don McLain Gill, as usual, we thank you so much for giving us time, as I said, really late in Manila, and sharing your expertise with all our viewers here on StratNews Global.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to more in the future.
Have a good one, Don, and thanks again. Just a reminder to our viewers, there is a QR code that will flash on your screens. There is a link in the YouTube descriptor as well if you would like to help us financially to follow all our social media handles for all the latest as well. This is The Gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi.